Thank you, Mr. Moose. And thank you for your patience. So again, Megan Smith, Deputy Director of Public Works. We were invited to come up this evening, staff, to give a presentation to give a bit of an overview and some background on the turbidity related violation that the town utility received in December. So I am going to kind of give an overview of this, a little bit of a timeline, give an opportunity to ask some questions, just give a broader picture of what took place. So why do we perform water quality monitoring? Multiple reasons. At the top of that list is to optimize our operations, right? So we're monitoring what's in our water all of the time at different points throughout our process so that we can modify operations as needed to ensure we're creating the highest quality water that we can to provide to our residents. We are also required to meet various regulatory requirements through our main regulating agency, which is the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And then the primary parameters that we're looking at during most of that water quality monitoring is related to turbidity. Turbidity is a measure of cloudiness in the water. That cloudiness is typically caused by kind of tiny suspended particles that are in the water. That's measured by shining light through that water column, and the reflection from those particles is how you determine how many there are in the water. Now again, and this was included in the letter, but we'll talk about it a little bit more. Another thing that causes a light to reflect is an air bubble in the water. Large, small, the smaller, the more there are, the higher level of refraction or light reflection that's coming off of that in a turbidimeter. So another measurement that we're measuring at various places throughout the water treatment facility, especially at the end as it's reaching our point of entry to our distribution system, is our chlorine residual in the water. Now, chlorine residual is a measure of it's showing us how well the water is able to prevent the growth of microbes, so prevent microbial contamination in the water, both in the distribution system and our storage tanks. It also helps us identify that we have used the proper amount of chlorine for our disinfection through our disinfection process with the treatment. So a quick overview of where we perform our water quality monitoring in our site. We have 12 total devices that you'll see, or locations that you see here. I've got kind of three different, there's a legend there that gives you some like red, black, and blue. I apologize, I was making this today, so there's not the greatest amount of differentiation in here, so there may be some people who aren't able to decipher some of these colors very well, and I do apologize about that. But we do have 12 in total. Those red dots that you see highlighted, those are locations where we are reporting measurements that we record to CDPHE as part of our monthly reporting requirements. The black dots, there's two black dots that you see. One is hard to read in the clear well. The other one is outside of the 1 million gallon storage tank. Those are also locations where we monitor measurements that are reported to CDPHE, but they do not include turbidity. Those red dots are all places where we're monitoring turbidity. The other dots you see there are blue dots. Those are other monitoring locations that we use for our own optimization purposes for the treatment process. Those locations are not reported to CDPHE. They're not required to be reported, but we are monitoring turbidity at all of those, along with other parameters as well. So as you can see, it's a pretty robust monitoring system. Most of these are monitored at the beginning of our system there, as before it enters the head of the plant to the rapid mix. That's actually monitoring, it's a daily grab sample that we pull to check the raw water turbidity from our source water coming off of the reservoir. That one's not a continuously monitored location. All the other locations that you see here are continuously monitored, and by that it means every minute it's taken a reporting. So to get into some of the, so that was just to give you a little background and context for what we're doing out there related to water quality monitoring on the minute by minute basis. Kind of a timeline of events that led to the violation notifications that were sent out on January 5th. On November 25th, and this gets a little weeded, so I apologize, but there were a lot of milestones and events that took place in about a 5-week span. There was a turbidity spike in what is, and I apologize about the initials there, but I don't have room to write all the big words. We have our combined filter effluent. And just to point that out, our combined filter effluent is going to be that long line with a red dot that heads into the clear well. So it's combining the water from all 4 filters into one pipe. So we have an individual filter effluent monitoring location outside of each one of those 4 filters. And then we have the combined filter effluent monitoring location at that point before it goes into the clear well. So on November 25th, we received, had an alarm, SCADA alarm, that an operator returned to the plant to respond to an elevated turbidity reading, a singular location in the facility at that combined filter effluent location. Got to the plant, made sure to check all the other parameters and all the other locations where we monitor this, this data. So the individual filter effluents, the potable water tanks, the clear well, even on the rapid mix basins, identified that there was not any elevated turbidity levels anywhere else in the facility. So that isolated that issue to that meter, that sample location in particular. So the operator took that meter offline, flipped it upside down, released a whole bunch of air bubbles out of it. Oh my goodness, well, that was the problem. Put the meter back in place. All levels went right back to normal, kind of the minute it was returned online. Now the week of December 4th, so a week later, a little over a week later, we notified CDPHE at that time. So when you have an elevated turbidity level, it is a requirement if it's over a 1.0 turbidity unit, a nephelometric turbidity unit. If it's over a 1.0, you are required to notify CDPHE within 24 hours. That was a mistake on our part, and that didn't happen on that November 25th reading. It didn't happen. So once it was identified that we'd had that in review of the data, of all the data at once, as we're compiling data to submit to the state for our monthly reporting, we communicated with CDPHE immediately that week, identified for them that we'd had this elevated reading, reviewed the procedures that we had with staff, procedures that we had in place at that time, ensure that we understand the monitoring requirements and the notification requirements along with that monitoring with all staff. We then gathered up all that data, submitted our data as standard by November 10th, December 10th. That monthly submissions are due to CDPHE on the 10th of the following month. So standard dates. So all that data was submitted to CDPHE on the 10th. We had another air-related turbidity spike, again, exact same location in that 1 CFE location on December 12th. This time, as we had run through and identified our process improvement opportunity at that with that previous episode, we contacted and notified CDPHE the same day, communicated with them. A couple of days later, on December 15th, we received the actual violation notice for the November violation. So there's a lot of timeline bouncing around here, but we had an episode that took place on November 25th. We notified CDPHE as soon as we became aware of it, which is the week of December 4th. It takes them some time. They're not going to issue us a violation until all of the data for that month is, well, they did not issue us a violation until the data for the previous month had been submitted in full. So we received that violation on December 15th, both for the maximum turbidity exceedance, and then also there was that failure to notify the department, CDPHE, in a timely manner. The reporting requirements for public notification for that violation is January 14th. So we have 30 days from the time that we receive the violation notification to ensure that we've supplied the public with proper notification. On December 19th, a few days later, we received the additional notification violation from CDPHE for that event on December 12th, with a public notification requirement of January 18th. So fast forward to right after Christmas. During this whole time, right, the background, these are the milestones. What's happening in the background is that we have meetings with operators. We're meeting internally with our own staff. We're meeting actually with the Jacobs process engineering design team that helped us design the new water treatment facility, troubleshooting with some of the locations. What are the points that the air could be entering in the line? It was very evident that it was air. It was also very evident when you look at this monitoring layout again, the likelihood or the possibility for there to be an introduction of something other than air in this closed system where the 4 lines that feed this pipe have run through 4 individual monitoring devices previously in the span of just a few feet from me to Mayor Pro Tem. These lines are coming together in a larger pipe, and then they're monitored at the end of that. We were very confident that the issue was air entrainment. So we were continuing to monitor and troubleshoot where are places in that line that we could be introducing that air. So through that process, we replaced several pieces of equipment, including an air release valve, the plumbing associated with the sample line that comes off of that combined filter effluent. So it's just a long line of tubing with several joints and 90-degree bends and that sort of thing. There's also a small pump that pushes it up to the turbidimeter. So we were replacing pieces of equipment in that effort. We did receive another, and this is kind of the reason there is so much planning and effort when you tackle these troubleshoot these issues, is that every time you go in and you're operating things and changing it, you're at risk of violation again, right? So the process that we went through to swap out the equipment resulted during that timeline in yet another turbidity spike as more air got entrained into that pipe. So there's this sort of like circular chasing our tail a little bit. So that's essentially what happened to us on the 28th. On the 29th, we had another air-related turbidity spike in the exact same location, only that singular location. Identified that the couple of pieces of equipment we had put in the previous day didn't fully solve the problem that we had at hand. So on the week of January 3rd, so the a couple days after the first of the year, I developed the public notification requirement. There is essentially a report writer that you go through on the CDPHE website that generates the language that's required for you to report in your public notifications. There's a limited amount of information that you're asked to provide, such as the dates, the elevated levels, what you're doing to solve the problem, when you're going to submit the letter. Those are the main points that we get to put in that letter. The rest of the language that's generated in that is required by the state, is outside of our control. And it's very black and white and rather alarming in places, especially when you understand, when you have the level of confidence that we did of the cause of the problem being air in those lines. So, so in quick succession over last week, we developed that notification, sent it to CDPHE for their final review. The biggest reason for that review is that we were looking to combine both of those notifications into one letter so that we're not having to send out multiple rounds and notify all at once. So that was the additional reason to make sure that we had their thumbs up and approval that it was fine for us to do that. We received that okay from them on January 4th. That happened to be the same day that we also installed another piece of equipment on that line. It's a fine air bubble trap. It's actually a Hawk piece of equipment. We use a lot of Hawk equipment in both of our facilities. And then we received that approval on the 4th, the same day that piece of equipment was installed. Sent that notification then went out to the public with bills that went out on January 5th. We have thus far, it's January 9th, so it's about 4 days. It's not a lot. We have seen very positive results from those initial results from those mitigation strategies. Specifically, since we put that bubble trap in place, we have not had any air-related turbidity spikes since that installation. And we have gone through a couple of process changes at the facility that could trigger that had triggered those high air-related turbidity spikes previously, and have not seen it. So fingers crossed as we're still monitoring that situation, determining if there's additional measures that need to be put in place. I did want to show a couple of pictures just to identify how very, very tiny can cause such a large problem. So that picture on the left is the vial that is actually in the turbidimeter that's shining the light through. You can see the bottom side of that vial where these bubbles are trapped, right, in that turbidimeter. And that picture on the right is a photo of our working overtime fine air bubble trap that is trapping a great deal of air. And I did want to make sure that I touched on, I know in the end there was kind of last week, there was a flurry of communication that went out, and it all came out very quickly as we were trying to meet a deadline to get the notifications in the utility bills. That is our primary, easiest way to notify our residents, our customers, all at the same time. I do want to note that with further discussion with CDPHE today, we do need to send out another notification only to those 1,700 or so resident or customers that do not receive paper bills, that receive only electronic. We are required to deliver, either hand deliver or mail a hard copy to every service connection that we serve. And so there are 1,715-ish that will go out in the mail this Friday. So I'm glad that we sent that out as early as we did. That allows us time to correct that, send this additional notification, and still be well within the window of our notification window prior to January 14th. And with that, that was a lot of information and a long timeline. And I'm happy to back up to any of those previous slides if you all have questions, or to that monitoring location diagram, if that's helpful too, in thinking about how all of this took place.
Any questions from the board?
I do want to thank our staff. That is all of the holidays covered in the last 2 months. That you guys have been working overtime in emergency situations and making sure that you notify the community as fast as possible and well before deadlines. So thank you for your hard work, more overtime than ever, and more stress during the holidays than I would hope that you ever have again in the future. So thank you. The fact that there is not a threat to public safety is wonderful, because of course that's all of our top priorities. So we are really happy that that is the case. And I do appreciate the communications that came out. I know that mass panic comes when you hear concerns about water. I understand that, right? We drink Wellington water at my house too. So, but to be assured that there isn't a threat to public safety is very important, and to understand everything that you explain here in lots of detail, including the timeline and actually the monitoring piece, which is where the issue was, not necessarily the quality of the water, is such a great relief. And I hope that people here can disseminate that information, maybe even as rapidly as the panic. So that would help everyone, of course, to be a better community, to feel safe, to feel secure in Wellington. So I guess that's my challenge to us up here, everyone here who's listening and hearing the exact facts of what's going on and the fact that we are safe and secure. Please spread that information as aggressively as any concerned information you would too, because that's also very important. Thank you.
Just had a couple questions. Thank you very much for putting this together on short notice. I know there's a lot of people that come to us as the board with concerns, and Trustee Teets and myself were like, it'd be great if we can just put this together. So I appreciate you guys pulling this together in like 24 hours, because I sent it to Patty on Monday and she's on vacation. And so appreciate the timeline. And thank you for explaining all this. It really helps on that. I only had 2 questions. So one, and thank you for answering my question about the delays. So that CDPHE does not allow us to notify trustees or anybody else until a certain point.
Yeah, we do need to receive the violation
Okay.
from CDPHE in order to have the actual violation in hand,
Okay.
to know the language that it is, to know the
Sure.
requirements for it, to know the reporting requirements, notification requirements.
Okay.
So we have to have that in hand before we can submit anything to the public.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And then the second question I had, I know you mentioned on the 28th and 29th, we also, when we're fixing things that are we going to receive additional violations for that? Or do they understand we're working on it, so there's not going to trigger additional and then we're having to send stuff out again?
No, that's why in the violation letter that went out, those dates were listed as well,
Oh,
the 28th and 29th. So the violation that you receive for this particular maximum turbidity threshold violation, it's for the month. And so
Oh,
you don't
okay.
receive an additional one every time. That violation covers essentially the whole month. Now you do need to report if there are multiple times within that there was an exceedance. That was part of the delay too, or not delay, scramble at the very end to make sure we got those additional dates included in that letter that was going out just, a few days later. So no additional violations.
Perfect. That was all I had. Thank you.
Trustee Mason?
Just a few comments, and you really appreciate staff working overtime on this one. I actually have, I used to work at Hawk Company in Loveland in a what seems like a prior life now. So I do have some familiarity with turbidimeters and that sort of thing. I do obviously want to stress to the public that the language in the CDPHE notice is mandatory and perhaps a bit frightening, but I do want to stress that, you know, there were no quality issues as far as the water goes. And I would actually point out that if you take your kitchen sink, for example, and the aerator that's installed on your kitchen sink, if you were to pour yourself a glass of water and measure that with a turbidimeter just coming right out of the tap, you would actually see very high amounts of turbidity in that water sample, only because there's air bubbles suspended in that water at that time. So I just do want to stress that obviously there were no quality issues in this case, and that we're looking at just air bubbles suspended in the water. Really what I'd just like to get back to and just ask that staff really that we ensure that we are properly reporting to CDPHE in the future, really making sure that we're getting those timelines where they need to be. So, but I do thank everybody for the overtime put in on this, and appreciate it.
Trustee Wiegand?
Just want to thank you for the troubleshooting that you guys done. You know, you were able to pretty much centralize it and take care of it, and we haven't had a reoccurring problem since then, so it looks like that is the problem. And, yeah, appreciate the reporting, and how the staff really did a good job. So, thank you.
Trustee Teets? She's still on.
Okay, I am exceedingly grateful for the effort put into this presentation. Thank you, Megan, for just reviewing that. I would love to share this video and be able to let people go and view the information firsthand as well. I don't know if that's something that we would be able to post as far as a information item on the Facebook page, or maybe just add it as a link if someone wants to view this further in the water bill sent out for the following month. I think that people being able to access and hear the information firsthand might be useful. The only issue that I really have at the end of the day is I want to know if we received any fine violations for the lack of 24-hour reporting. And also trying to figure out, I understand it was, I think, December 4th when you received the first notice of the violation. But we as trustees, after that first notice, didn't receive notice till hours before our actual residents did in January, when it seems like we could have experienced that notification a lot sooner. Then it wouldn't have been as surprising to, I know, me as a trustee getting that information just mere hours before it went out to the public. It possibly would have given us more time to get educated and react if someone reached out to us personally, and we could have had better explanations up front. But I am grateful for the presentation, and I think this will assist residents in being able to view and understand, first of all, what that notice meant, but secondly, that the water is still safe and within regulation and requirements for our town. That's all.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that detailed presentation. Thank you, Trustee Gator and Trustee Teets, for suggesting the opportunity to present this detailed information to help ease the fears and concerns of the community regarding a potential public safety concern, which is not a public safety concern at all. Thank you.